Years right off the campus of Georgetown University in DC. And so we're going to begin today with one of my favorite prayers from St. Ignatius. And here we are. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Take, Lord, and receive all my liberty, my memory, my understanding, my entire will. All I have and all my own, you have given to me. To you, Lord, now I return. Everything is yours. Do with it what you will. Give me only your love and your grace, for that is enough for me. Amen. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. It is a pleasure to be here. I'm going to share with you a presentation that I had delivered to a group of Catholic business leaders from around the country, helping them think more deeply about how to create healthy, holy organizations. And as you'll get, the key takeaway from this talk is that healthy, holy organizations typically start with healthy, holy leaders of those organizations. All right, so that's what we're going to do here today. Unpack it. I'm going to share with you essentially a 5-step game plan to create a healthier and holier approach to leading your organization. And if you're not leading an organization anymore, Kevin Edward can lead your family in this way as well. All right. So first, a question. And I want to share this answer with your table, okay? When you hear the word successful, who is the first person to come to mind? When you hear the word successful, who's the first person to come to mind? Just share your answers around your table.
Michael McGivney.
All right, let's get a couple names out here. Kevin?
My dad.
Your dad, love it. Cheryl. Tucker Carlson, all right.
I just throw out McSaden.
Nick. I love it. McSaden.
Working at Clemson, sure.
Well, hey,
That is unusual. Thank you for pointing that out.
Sorry.
I get credit.
Not successful right now.
The best part is in a South Carolina environment, I always get Dabo. I didn't even I looked at Clemson and I thought, I heard Dabo when it came out of your mouth.
He's awesome. I was Yes.
Who else? Who's got a couple more?
My wife.
Your wife, another.
My father.
Your father.
Frank Lucas, the founder of LSVP.
Yes. Gary?
Well, it's interesting because I'll be honest, I'm struggling with my son. Anyways, Elon Musk came to my mind, but he's not my person to think successful. You know, I was just trying to teach my son that that's not somebody he should look to be, radiate success. I think our bishop is truly successful, being a New Yorker and having been here for 12 years and all of his accomplishments. So.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
Couple more.
Jesus. Amen.
Michael McGivney.
Who is Michael?
He founded the Knights of Columbus. Out in Connecticut.
I love it.
Jesus.
Jesus. Rex?
Ben Greenwald.
Glenn Green? Okay.
He's a journalist.
Journalist. All right. We've got a whole bunch of different people that we've identified, right? Now, what are the words that you use to describe these men and women? Well, I don't know if you had any women there, but what words would you use to describe Michael?
Saintly.
Saintly. Jesus?
Jesus.
Yeah, but what words, though? This is important.
word?
Forgiving.
Forgiving, sure. What else? What other words? What words would you use to describe Glenn, or your role model, your success role model, I should say?
Supportive.
Supportive. Yeah. What else?
Dedicated.
Dedicated. Selfless.
Humble.
Humble. Yes.
Grounded.
Oh, grounded. Yeah.
Charismatic.
Charismatic. Yes.
Loyal.
What's that?
Loyalty.
Loyal. Yes. When I ask you when you think of the word successful, what comes to mind, right? The person is interesting, right? But what's much more important are the words that you would use to describe them. Now, with Jesus, I think we could all say that holy might be appropriate, right? So I want to ask you this question. When you hear the word holy, now, who's the first person? Oh, sorry. Forgot my question here. Think about your success role model. if that person represents a 10 on a scale of 1 to 10, represents success, where are you today on that scale of 1 to 10? Got your number? All right, the big reveal. When I count to 3, I want you to show me using your hands where you fall on that scale of 1 to 10. All right? I want to be clear, the number means absolutely nothing to me, right? A 2 to you might be a 9 to me, a 9 to you might be a 2 to me. Doesn't matter, but I do want you to have a number. It's really important for the balance of this conversation, all right? So on the count of 3, you're just going to hold up however many fingers representing where you fall on that scale of 1 to 10, where 10 represents your success role model. 1, 2, 3.
Role model for ourselves.
Yes, exactly.
Is that what you're saying?
All right. Looks like we got a range of 4 to 7, 8, no 10s, right? No? Okay, good. We've all got a ways to go. And that's not unexpected. My hope is that this talk, wherever you are, or wherever you think you are, right, on the scale of like 4, 5, 6, will help you to get to that next level. Right? If you're at 5, get to 6. If you're at 7, get to 8. If you're at 2, get to 3. Right? That's the goal here. Just an idea or two to help you take that next step. Now, of course, in the context of a Catholic conversation, I want to get the question I had just previewed a moment ago. Same idea, right? When you hear the word holy, who's the first person to come to mind? In addition to Jesus, when you think of holy, so someone other than Jesus, when you think of holy, who's the first person to come to mind? Bonus points if this person is still living today. Turn to the person sitting next to you, share your answer to that question.
You?
How about you?
Both John Paul II.
Everybody got a holy role model here? Yeah? Anybody have one that is currently living?
I said my mother.
Your mother, love it. Sharon?
Archbishop Bigelow.
Yes. Anyone else?
Father West.
Father West. Excellent. That's our parish at our pastor at St. Clair. Now, I'm not going to ask you to share the number, but same question. If that person represents 10 on a scale of 1 to 10, where are you on the holiness continuum today? You don't have to share it, but I want you to give yourself a number, give yourself a score. All right. Carrie, you said something so interesting a moment ago. First, when you hear the word successful, who's the first person that came to mind?
Elon Musk.
Elon
And
Musk.
that's only because I'm having this struggle and conversation with my son.
Yeah. I ask this question a lot in a lot of different organizations. Rex, if I went into your organization and asked that question, Elon Musk, and who's going to be number 2? Same vein. Jeff Bezos, right? Anybody want to go for number 3? You could probably guess. Recently deceased. Still gets a lot of nods. Steve Jobs. It's the triple threat there, right? And that is just exactly as you would expect in a secular post-Christendom society, right? As you would say. So today, what I want you to be thinking about is like, what do we need to do to create success, right? To move up that success ladder, right? While at the same time, moving up that holiness scale. And I'm going to suggest that your ability to do both is really imperative to creating the kind of organization, creating the kind of family that you want to live and lead. All right? So, a few starting assumptions based upon this. Number 1, you're smart and driven, right? And if any of these assumptions are wrong, just let me know. Object. You are smart and driven. You want to create successful outcomes in a holy way. right? You want to create a high-functioning, profitable business, for example, but you want to do it in a manner that Jesus would not frown upon. Number 3, you're working really hard. Again, a lot of times I am in organizations where they are just getting their butts kicked, right? So this is sort of, this elicits a bit of a groan, right? That's an understatement for a lot of the folks that I work with. And despite the fact that you're working really hard, you're not quite there yet, right? And that was the whole purpose of that little benchmarking exercise a moment ago. So what do we have to do, right? How do we actually get this, move ourselves forward? I think the first question, right, as it relates to holiness, right? What's holding you back from being more holy today? Right, this may be an overwhelming question, a challenging question, but I want you to dig into it just for a minute or two right now, all right? Again, within your table, what's holding you back from being more Christ-like, if we can use that term to approximate holiness? But what's holding you back from being more holy today? Think about it and just share with your neighbor.
It's a hard question to answer. What comes to mind is discipline. I feel like,
Sit down, join it.
Just gotta watch it, it's all good.
things I always
Another 20 seconds.
Be bold. I think that's something that for me is like, I know I have that relationship with Jesus and God every day, but definitely like I have to be bolder.
It's the same thing here.
So this thing gets into there, that if we are talking and having a conversation, always just about God in this conversation, it's not me. It's like being bolder to show we might change last year.
All right, let's bring it back to the center. What's holding you back? What were some thoughts from this table? What's holding you back?
Well, I think just the secular distractions of every day, and specifically at this moment, we were talking about the technology and how people can become complacent and they don't want the human connection, the human touch. They would prefer, even if it's the phone ringing, they'll just text you back. If it's a Zoom, they don't want to meet in person. Whatever it is that next thing that they're not choosing to do because they don't want to be put in any other way. Just let them alone.
Now, I like it. Anybody want to guess what I didn't love about that answer? What was the question?
What's holding you back?
Yeah. So what's holding you back? I hear what's holding them back.
Well, that's holding me back, because I can't communicate the way that I would like to.
For me, it's myself. I mean, there's just things that, sometimes, we just kind of want to start with being the best version we can be, so to speak. At least, the outside distractions are unfortunately constantly there, worse because of COVID. But to the extent we can make ourselves better, hopefully we can influence those to a better extent.
If it sounds like in the right way to present it, but I was saying, which is extensive what you guys are saying, is discipline. Like, it's so easy to fall into the trap of daily life and be distracted. I've got a little baby, I've got a 16-year-old, and they're all out of their minds. And, you know, there are times when I'll find myself self-reflecting, going, hey, you're not taking the time out to talk to the guy, okay? One thing I try to do every day is I try to, carve out 10 minutes in the morning and set my day by having a conversation with God. I found out over time, the more I talk to him, the more he talks back to me. And, then time will go on and I'll be like, geez, I haven't talked to him in a week, I've been distracted. And, so I started this term discipline out, but I think we all need to be more disciplined because eventually routine, eventually communication is all day, every day, all the time. And is when I almost feel when I say discipline, it's like when I'm lazy, is it, do I have to be, my feet up in the fire to do a routine? Well, it shouldn't. It should all be easy, flowing communication, conversation.
So we get too much distraction, we got not enough discipline. What else? What else is holding you back from being holier today? Fear.
My thought, go ahead.
Rick, well, let's just jump on that real quick, Rex. Say more.
To be holy, I think, is to speak your truth and a truth, and a lot of times it's speaking truth to power, and there can be repercussions for that. And so there's a lot, I think, that's what I struggle with.
Absolutely. Love it. No fear.
My thought was, and what I've been working on is forgiveness. I've come a long way in that if you cross me now, I won't trip you when you walk by. But I found out through my years that you can't find the love of your fellow man holding that grudge. So although it may not look like it, it's been a great long way journey for me.
Yeah, beautiful. Thanks for sharing. What else? Any other things we haven't mentioned? What did you guys come up with?
I said, my financial responsibilities, like having a job. I
Sure.
mean, you get to do ministry, but the type of ministry, yes, I do, but like serving the poor or, helping the homeless or doing whatever. I might be raising money to help that, but I'm not out there doing that. And like Mother Teresa, you think of holy, what was she doing, so I think about the other responsibilities that I have, but I don't get to do that.
Absolutely. So, Carrie, I want to suggest that your answer is actually very similar to Rex's answer. Do you see that?
Yeah.
Anybody see how that fear is still here? What are you afraid of?
What's holding me back specifically?
Well, think about what do you the fact that you have to have a job. That statement is actually a manifestation of fear. And if anybody wants to jump in and help Carrie out here, what is she afraid of? How can you phrase that as something of a fear?
Could it be the fear of what other people think of you?
Exactly.
I was thinking about that with Rex.
Right,
Yes.
but with her, if she wasn't able to provide for her family in the manner and fashion that she thinks society feels she should,
Oh, yes.
that's
Absolutely.
then but that's the whole problem with Facebook. Is we're all trying to be somebody else and judged by a third person. We don't internalize. How do you feel about yourself? Because that's the most important.
I find this to be, again, I ask this question all the time, so thank you for sharing. And this is so spot on, exactly what I was expecting to hear. But Carrie, one of the most common stories I hear about why I can't be more of something that I want to be is I can't afford to yet. Can't afford to yet. I want to be, someone saying Mother Teresa, right? Love you, Mother Teresa. Yeah, but I got to work, right? I can't afford to be. I've got, and again, it's the implication that Mother Teresa somehow could afford to do that, right? I mean, but that's why these conversations are important. When we think about like what's holding us back, there's typically going to be 4 categories of challenge that we're trying to overcome. I'm going to share 3 of them, and then we're going to get to the 4th, which we just talked about a little bit when we talked about distraction. Okay, but number 1 is a lack of clarity. The idea when I ask you how holy are you and who is holy, that's just a clarifying question. And what does that actually mean? What does it look like? The reason I ask who is because it's a simple proxy for this term holiness, which can mean something different to everybody. So the number 1 thing is, I'm not quite sure what I want, or why I want it. So what is holiness and why does holiness matter? So that's number one. The second category, a lack of strategy. I don't know what to do or how to do it. How do I be more holy? Kevin gave us a little bit of insight into what he's doing, right? This idea of discipline. It's actually a strategy question. What did Kevin say? What's he start his day with? 10 minutes of prayer in the morning. That's a strategic question. We may come to this and say, well, 10 minutes of prayer in the morning ain't going to work for me. Right? What that means is I have a strategy problem. I know what I want to do, but I don't know how to do it. The third issue is in between our ears. I call it an issue of belief or a mindset issue. And this one is going to sting, but at least a few of you, question by question, just briefly, ever so briefly, especially in this room, probably not as many, but ever so briefly, do I really want to be holy? Is that really what I'm after? Right? That's a belief or mindset issue. I'm not sure I can or want to do what I have to do. And the can is an important part too. How many times? I hear this all the time. You may not hear it as much, but if I had a nickel for everyone that said, I wish I could be like Mother Teresa. Right? There's an implicit belief there that I can't be like Mother Teresa. Mother Teresa was some rarefied human being that had powers given to her by Christ himself that allowed her to suffer and endure and do what she did. And I think we can all appreciate that's not true, right? Full stop, that's not true, right? Mother Teresa was a human being just like us. Interestingly enough, anybody know, Kevin starts with 10 minutes a day. Anybody know how many minutes of prayer Mother Teresa started with a day? 3 hours. 3 hours, right? In front of the Blessed Sacrament. Talk about bumping up your strategy there, right? So the first 3 things I want you to be mindful of. If you want to be more holy, and hint, this also will allow you to be more successful, right? You got to overcome these 3 roadblocks. 1, the lack of clarity. Number 2, a lack of strategy. Number 3, a problematic mindset or faulty beliefs. These are all holding us back from being more of what we want to be. So let me talk you through, and I'm going to explain there's a 4th thing that we've got working against us. But I'm going to talk you through just a very simple 5-step approach that I describe as good news, because I want to suggest these are all solvable problems. Not easy, but they can be solved, and you can make progress over time. There's my crew, my brood. We got another little lady on the way at the end of October. So I'm in the trenches here, right? And I'd be sitting at that table and I'd be giving you a whole bunch of things that are holding me back. And as sweet and innocent as that team looks, right? I'm about to hold you back, right? That crew tests my holiness every single day. So I have a training company, right? And I really view this as a vocation. And I say this to the people who are, the business leaders that are paying me money. Leadership development, executive coaching, training. It's my Trojan horse strategy. What I have come to realize is that you have much higher performing businesses, much higher performing teams and organizations when the men and women in those businesses, in those teams and organizations, wake up in the morning with a clear understanding of where they are, where they want to go, and what they have to do today to get there. And that necessarily requires them as individuals to understand what success means to them, and if they are of faith, what holiness means, or how holiness integrates with their definition of success. So that's what I've been doing for the last 10 years. Before that, management consulting, work with a whole bunch of different companies. And one of the neat things about working with a whole bunch of different companies, some of which sort of have a Catholic orientation, but most of which are full secular, businesses, I get to meet and know these leaders at a really, intimate level. And what I have come to believe or discover is that most of the leaders who are struggling, right, even when they're running really big companies, right, are at the end of the day struggling with faith-based questions. Yes, there's execution issues. Yes, there's strategy issues. Yes, the markets might not be doing what they want to do. But what's internally their struggle is, how do I reconcile my shareholders' demand for more at lower cost with an internal belief that I was made for more, at whatever cost. And so I've learned in working with these men and women how to approach this. Right? It's not a silver bullet, there's no magic wand, but there is a process that you can follow, a playbook of sorts that can help in this effort. Right? So it's 5 steps. I'll take you through them. Number 1, you got to answer the God question. So again, working with all these executives, we always start with strategy. We always start with execution. Things aren't happening on time, on target. We're over budget. We're under, I'm losing people. We're not competitive. These are the kinds of challenges that organizations typically hire a guy like me to help them solve. And so we get in there, and those are solvable problems. I mean, not everything. Sometimes you're in the wrong market at the wrong time, and those are going to be more difficult issues to resolve. But we get around, what's the clarity, we fine-tune the strategy, and work on the mindset of the organization, and good things start to happen. When I'm working with the leaders themselves, though, right, and they've achieved some level of success, they've achieved some level of, and that success is typically defined as financial or status level success, right? So they're in a position of perceived opportunity and power and or fame, money, whatever. We get to the God question. And the God question is very simply informed by this, one of my favorite quotes from St. Augustine. You're probably familiar with this. You've made us for yourself, O Lord, and our hearts are restless until they rest in you. And what I often bump into in my work is that people they're filling that God-sized hole in their heart with everything else but God, right? And so I think of St. Augustine when I typically introduce St. Augustine before I ask the God question, but then we get to the God question. And this is one that every Catholic leader, Christian leader really needs to have an answer to. And this may seem silly, but you'd be surprised how few people have really reflected on this question. And this is, drum roll please, does God exist? Does God exist? Yes or no? Is it true? And if so, and I don't push, if yes or if no, what are the implications on how you live your life? This is the lead domino, right? Because if it's true, and there was a guy named Jesus who lived 2,000 years ago and died to save, died for us, but before he died, gave us a playbook on how to live so that we can be reunited with him forever. You got to have an answer to that one, right? Because right now, the world's got a completely different view as to whether or not that question is true. There's a lot of ambiguity, right? We have to answer this question for ourselves. Yeah.
My struggle is not so much me answering that question with yes, because I can't. It's the people that I'm around that I need to know the answer is yes. And I cannot get them to get there. And it's infuriating to me. And some of the people are the people that are closest to me, people I love the most. That's hard.
So I want to flag this for a second, right? Put a pin on this idea that what's holding you back, perhaps, right? You mentioned communication, right? But it's really a manifestation of communication that I like to refer to as influence. You're having a difficult time influencing the people around you to the truth of that message, right? So just write this down or just flag this, right? What would have to be true for me to be able to more effectively influence the men and women or children that I'm surrounded with to live more like or in line with Christ?
And quick question, are you able to give these decks out? Or
I don't give the deck out, but feel free to take pictures on like that if you want.
I'm taking notes of the scene.
Yeah, we're going to have the presentation shared online afterwards.
Okay.
So this is step number 1. You got to answer the God question. Is it true? And if so, what are the implications? Anybody know who this is?
Need a second.
Not yet.
Is the one with-
Blessed Carlo Acutis.
Yeah. Saint Clair?
Computer.
How many? Yes. How many have, in addition to Kevin, teenage children? There you go. Get Blessed Carlo involved, right? You need some help, bring in Blessed Carlo. So Blessed Carlo Acutis going through the canonization process, the long story short, he teenager who just was incredibly holy. And it's funny because influenced a whole bunch of people, including his parents. He converted his parents, or brought his parents back to the faith by virtue of his model, by virtue of his example. And on Thursday mornings after daily mass at St. Clair, we pray a little devotional to Carlo Acutis. And one of the lines that always sticks out at me, there's a list of quotes of his that we then pray, integrate into a devotional. And this prayer, or this quote, always sticks with me, and it goes right to this whole concept of the God question. He writes, or this is Acutis. Terminal with lymphoma. That was what he's sharing with his friends, his family. They're devastated. They're devastated that this bright light is going to be extinguished, in their opinion, too soon. And this is what he says. What a message. Right? What a message for all of us. How much time do I waste on things that do not please God? The answer, way too much. Right? But that's the end result of the God question. Right? This seems to be the most integrated way of thinking about the God question, and maybe the great outcome at the end. Right? Not just okay or accepting death, but anticipating and happy to die, right? Because you know that you haven't wasted a minute. So, step number 1, answer the God question. Step number 2, you got to believe. And we talked a moment ago, 3 things that hold us back. The third issue was mindset. Bad beliefs. We must believe. And not in anything, but specifically in this idea that holiness is possible. Right? We set out, who is holy? How holy are you? You've got to believe that holiness is possible. Now, this question hit me with like a lightning bolt. And I think explains a lot of the trends in our society today, right? Every one of these metrics, as Carrie knows only too well, right, are plummeting. Why is that, right? Why is that? Well, in my opinion, and seconded by Matthew Kelly, it's because I think a lot of folks don't believe that holiness is possible. And this is from Kelly's book, The Biggest Lie in the History of Christianity. It's such a powerful idea, right? This one lie can neutralize us, can turn us into mere spectators. The devil's greatest triumph is the perpetuation of this belief that holiness is not possible. Mother Teresa brought a lot of people to the faith. Certainly got a lot of people thinking about the faith, right? And a lot of people that aren't Catholic. Why? Because they looked at it and said, oh my goodness, it's a holy woman. What does she know that I don't know? What could possibly be motivating her? Let me explore that a little bit. We've got to believe that holiness is possible. And I know it seems sort of self-evident. Of course we do. We're at this Catholic Business Center, but it's a question for you. Do I really believe that it's possible to be holy in this secular world? Despite the fact that I've got kids to take care of. Right? Despite the fact that I've got a job that I've got to be at 8, 9, 10 hours a day. This is the second step. To really question, do I believe that holiness is possible? And when we do, we go from opportunistic and hopeful, right? I hope I get to heaven. I'm going to try to be a good person and, roll the dice, which is, let's be honest, it's about 95% of the Catholics that we know. That's their holiness, that's their heaven strategy, right? I'm going to do as good as I possibly can and hope for a good break, or a lucky break, right, from St. Peter. So we're going to go from opportunistic and hopeful to, my favorite word, intentional. Right? We want to be intentional. That's the idea. Now, I'm bringing all the power, all these heavy hitters across the church together in this talk. Thomas Merton, you want to read 7-Story Mountain? really neat book. One of my favorite lines, and this is how I, start to subtly infuse Catholic, teaching and theology into my secular leadership development, because everybody gets this quote. Right? When people climb the ladder of success, only to realize when they reach the top that the ladder has been propped up against the rock. I count on, it would take multiple hands to count on to count the number of senior business leaders who have been brought to tears by that quote. Men and women that are 20, 30, 40 years into their career and are just simply recognizing now, I chose the wrong wall. So when we go from opportunistic and hopeful to intentional, it's really about choosing the wall, right? It's about choosing the outcomes that we're really after. And what I like to say is there's essentially 5 questions that we've got to be more intentional about, right? When we're thinking about our wall. The outcomes that we want to create, the impact that we want to have, the problem or problems that we want to solve, the difference that we want to make, and then last but not least, the way we want to make it. When's the last time you gave any of these questions some real thought?
I love the last 2 because I heard this in a podcast somewhere, that it matters how you win. So the difference in the way, it matters how you win.
And that even goes back to the outcome, right? Which then suggests wins and losses matter a little less than, to use the sports analogy, graduation rate, right? Or the success of my athletes 20 years after they leave the program and football is long gone. We're circling back to the first of the challenges, what holds us back, clarity. These are a pretty good collection of questions. When we talk about what's holding us back, these are questions that we need greater clarity around. We're going to choose our wall. And there's our friend Mother Teresa, Saint Teresa. Love this idea. What I love so much about it is that this is just a soft and subtle and loving way she turns our secular world on its head. Because our secular world says, you gotta do great things. That's what gets you on the magazine cover. That's what gets you $1 billion. That's whatever it is, right? And that may, being Elon Musk just may not seem like that's something that I either want or can do, right? But we can all do great small things with great love.
Lady Diana died on the same day as St. Teresa, or within a week, because she took all the headlines. And Mother Teresa just didn't get it, because she wasn't in the secular world, she was in the other world, better world.
So step 2, you got to believe. You got to manage your mindset, and the specific belief you need to test and reevaluate, and ultimately reinforce is that holiness is possible. Number 3, we've got to create some space. We've got to create some space. I mentioned that there are 4 things that hold us back: a lack of clarity, a lack of strategy, problematic or suboptimal beliefs or mindset, and then the 4th is what everybody in this room will immediately recognize and appreciate. We've talked about distraction and the like. I have a very simple term for it. Oh, sorry. I haven't given this presentation live in enough times here. Let me give you an example before I share what that 4th thing is. This is the guy, Jonathan Frostick, okay? Jonathan, I have no idea who this guy is. I can't even remember what he did, but somehow this story got forwarded along to me. Long story short, Jonathan Frostick was a business guy. Had a heart attack. While he's sitting in his hospital bed, he survived, sitting in his hospital bed, wrote a LinkedIn post and said this. Number 1, these are my immediate thoughts. And he literally bulleted it out. Really easy to read. Post-heart attack, my first thoughts as I wake up out of surgery. Right? But then, after a little bit more reflection, a few more insights and a little more perspective. Now, I read this and I said, yeah, that sounds right. That sounds like this idea of going from hopeful to intentional, right? That shift. But I wasn't the only one that read it. Over 300,000 people clicked like on that. Now, I look at this and that ain't rocket science, right? It's almost cliche. You have a heart attack, you change your worldview, but 300,000 people, it's probably, I'm sure it's up to 500,000 now, right? Had this epiphany, or shared this epiphany. This reflects the fourth roadblock, the fourth obstacle that we have to overcome. As I mentioned before, I've got a nice little name for it. I call it the whirlwind. Right? The whirlwind is all the stuff we've got to do that pulls us away, that distracts us, that diverts our attention from living more like Christ wants us to live. The whirlwind is real. I look at that picture and I think, that's me. Right? And I look at that big little baby, right? And the first thought, you might have is, well, you can't get rid of the baby, right? And that's the thing about the whirlwind. The whirlwind isn't bad. It's not just bad stuff, right? Like the overflowing email inbox, the back-to-back meetings, right? The whirlwind is also the good stuff, right? The whirlwind is the good stuff too. It's the kids' school play that you don't have to go to, that you want to go to, right? It's sitting in a deer stand like Kevin does with his 16-year-old daughter, 14-year-old daughter, right? Wait for that big buck, right? It takes a lot of time, but that's the kind of stuff we want to do. And yet, it's still part of this whirlwind, the obligation and all the stuff that we've got going on. The busyness, the overwhelm that ultimately leads to exhaustion, leads to challenges of communication. I can't get in there. I can't create the space to have the conversations that I want to have. And more likely, I can't create the space to have the conversations that I need to have with the one with whom I really need to speak. So the whirlwind is not going away. What we have to figure out is, how do we create space despite the whirlwind? And I often say, the whirlwind is defined by urgency. It's defined by urgency. And I suspect this will ring true for everybody. When urgency and importance clash, urgency wins every time. So how do we do that, right? How do we create that space? Well, that is the challenge, right? That's where we have to start being more intentional. Not just about creating a holy life, but creating a holy moment now and next hour and the hour after that. Creating holy starts to our day. Now, I won't embarrass anybody in here. Not that it would be embarrassing. In fact, it's often a badge of honor in most organizations that I work with. But I like to ask, who starts the day by checking their email? Or who checks their email within the first 30 minutes of the day? Rex, I can guarantee 80% of your folks do. Maybe not you, but, right? Because about ballpark 80% of the people that I work with check their email in the first 30 minutes of the day.
The other 20% are lying.
And the other 20% are lying. That's right. The whirlwind loves that. That is the whirlwind. It's the portal, right, through which the whirlwind enters our lives. I like to say your email inbox is somebody else's to-do list. And if you want to start being more intentional, you start living in a more holy and thoughtful way, well, we've got to get our stuff done first. And then create an ability, create the energy, create the resources that we need to go help others. So creating space is the key here. And coming back to my guy, St. Ignatius, creating space is always about asking that question, what does God want of me? What is God asking me to do to deepen life, His life within me? Anybody ever prayed the Examen or familiar with the Examen? The Ignatian spiritual exercises. 4 questions at the end of the day. Wonderful way to use that space. If you create the space, wonderful way to use that space to continue to create leverage and momentum to create holier lives, holier outcomes. All right, nearly done. Oh, we got a hard stop. Real quick. We got 2 more things. Step number 4. We got to clarify our values. Clarify our values. Values get a lot of press, a lot of attention in our world today. Nobody actually knows what a value is. And I don't say that lightly. I've been doing this for 10 years. Nobody really knows what a value is. They know what values are, or examples of, but what is an actual value? Right? A value is a principle, standard, that guides our decision-making and behavior and serves as the basis for interaction with others. That is what a value is. Right? There are lots of values, right? When people say, what is a value, they typically start giving me words, right? But herein lies the challenge of knowing what your values are. You look at this list, there's over 200 values on that list. Give me one that sticks. Pull one out and say, that's a stupid thing, right? No, they're all good, right? So when I say, hey, what are your values? You say, well, no, I like all these things, right? And that is the problem, right? If you value everything, say it with me, you value nothing, right? The good news is we don't value everything. We certainly don't value everything in the same way. We all of us have a set of personal core values, a small subset of those words or others that we personally prioritize. How do I know we personally prioritize them? By what you do. Your behavior tells me what you value, not the words on your wall or website or whatever, right? And a quick show of hands, how many folks have company core values? Yeah. So, good, right? But that is typically a marketing exercise, right? It's a set of aspirational words that we look at, it makes us feel good, but doesn't always accurately reflect how we live within the organization. What we do and what we don't do, just as important, all right? We got to know what we value. Once we know what we value, we can create a much more integrated and intentional life. And this is what it ultimately will look like. Our actions allow us to meet our goals in a manner consistent with our values. And this is the thing, like most of our organizations are obsessed with what are we going to do in order to get where we want to go. They don't spend nearly enough time thinking about how. And that's what values are. They give you a choice, an option, a way of achieving the outcome that you're after. And that's where we have to know what we value. We do know what we value. Jesus has given us a list, a playbook, right? The values that he personally prioritizes. And that's really at the heart of our conflict with the secular world right now. It's a conflict of value. It's a conflict of values, right? And so the more we understand what we value today as evidenced by our behavior, the easier it is for us to change our behavior and subsequently change our values, or change our values and then change our behavior to suit. This is really, really important. Democrats and Republicans, I love talking politics. The problem with our dialogue these days is that when you break down the different platforms, what you find when you look at it like a nerd like I do through a values lens is that we're valuing the same things in a slightly different way. I'm going to give you 2 core values that are consistent across all human beings. There's 14 primary core values. I want you to tell me I'm going to put them in order. 2 words, right? Number 1, freedom, responsibility. Number 2, responsibility, freedom. Freedom, responsibility, what political party is that? Independence, responsibility.
Republican.
That's the Republicans, right? Responsibility, freedom, right? That's your mask mandate. That's your mask dialogue in a nutshell, right? Why does this matter? It matters because we both value the same thing, right? We both value freedom and responsibility. But if we just slightly change the order in which we put those values, it's going to create totally different behaviors, or at least the perception of. That's why if we want to create a better, healthier, more constructive, more humane, and consistent world, we got to know what we value, specifically in what order, right? When you know that, you have an ability to, 1, seek to understand somebody else, explain where you're coming from, and it doesn't solve all problems, but it definitely creates a more healthy and constructive dialogue. All right, misaligned life with wrong emails or wrong values, right? More aligned life, right? Start the day with email, no planning, high effort, low output execution, distraction business, Good intention, little progress. This is the challenge. And then ultimately exhaustion, overwhelmed, boredom. A more aligned life, right? Starting the day right. Creating space to plan and pray. High effort leads to high output. More efficiency, less wasted time and energy. Confidence, gratitude, balance. It's an alignment challenge that most of us are dealing with. We just haven't figured out what do I really value, and as a result, what do I need to do, and or what do I need to stop doing? Right now, especially in our organizations, people are saying, I'm just going to do as much as I possibly can because there will be pain or negative consequences if I don't, if I fail. All right. Values questions. What does the world value? The company value? What does God value? God, Jesus, as evidenced in the Bible and Scripture. What do you value? These are some really powerful questions to reflect on. And what I keep coming back to is that I am in a pitched battle personally to jettison or push back on the values of the world and more fully embrace and be comfortable with living the values that Jesus has taught us. All right, last but not least, step 5 to creating that holier, healthier organization, outcome, mentoring. We need help. This is a team sport. Very, very hard to do this by yourself. Whether it's mentoring, coaching, or community like this, we need help. I know from firsthand experience, this is Father John Hopkins, who changed my life roughly, my 10-year wedding anniversary is end of October. So I met Father John roughly 10 and a half years ago. Father John runs a ministry for married couples in Bethesda, Maryland. And I had to go to this thing as part of the pre-Cana requirement. And Father John, to tell you that I was not looking forward to this retreat is an overstatement, right? Or it's not a gross understatement. It was like a 3-day weekend, Labor Day. I go, oh, I can't believe we got to go and listen to do this. Father John's running it. Father John grew up in the Bronx. When I met him, and the first thing he said, I've been a Catholic priest for 25 years. I've been in marriage ministry for 24 of those years. My job in the church is to keep married people married. Does anybody want to guess the number one way to keep married people married? Anyone want to guess? Communicate, that helps. But Father John took a much harder tack. He goes, let's make sure the wrong people don't get married in the first place. No. You can imagine me, I'm sitting back here like, oh my God. I hear that, I'm like, okay. Like, you got my attention. Like, I said, yes, I like this guy. And I really did like this guy. Until Father John turned his attention to me. At the time, I was a management consultant, started a company, traveling all over the world, doing this kind of fancy management consulting stuff. Father John listens, he interviews everybody individually, listens to the talk, listens to as I tell my story. He's like, okay, Ben, congratulations. It sounds like you've done really well and that you're working really hard. Congratulations, blah, blah, blah. And he goes, but the way I see it, you got a choice. I said, well, what's that about? You got a choice. And you got to decide. Do you want to be a world-class international management consultant? Or do you want to be a world-class husband? I was like, both? I figured you'd say that. But success in both of those domains has one single common denominator that's not easily shared. Anybody want to guess what that is? Time. It's like, it's really hard. I can't see how you're going to be a really great husband and father when you're on a 17-hour flight to Johannesburg every couple of months. And I tell you, there's an expression, when the student is ready, the teacher appears. That was the moment. I said, holy cow, what am I doing? And I thought about it, and I went into my partners in the consulting company, and I said, hey, so Father John told me that I got to choose, and I kind of like being a father. And my partners literally say, that's great advice. We choose international management consulting. And so that was the kick in the pants I needed to actually, again, 10 years ago, I started this work. But my life would be completely different had it not been for the intervention of Father John. If it had not been for that conversation. That's why surrounding ourselves with holy men and women who are on the journey, right? And importantly, spiritual advisors is so important. It's hard to overstate, right? When you're surrounded by the right people, increased clarity, increased creativity, new ways of solving problems, increased efficiency. Don't waste time doing something that's already been figured out. And finally, a better, healthier mindset, that conversation. And whether it's spiritual advising, whether it's coaching, whether it's therapy, whether it's small group, right? That's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about mentorship. Surrounding yourself with people who want you to become that best version of yourself and have ideas, can help along that journey. A great book on, this is executive coaching, but this guy, Bill Campbell, was a coach to all like the big technology CEOs. And this, Eric Schmidt, was a co-founder of Google, and he writes in that book, your level of success will always be capped by your level of investment in personal development. Now this is about business success, right? But it's absolutely true as it relates to our quest to holiness. How much are you investing in spiritual development, in personal development of any kind? Most of us or most of my clients will say, not as much as I'd like. And that's absolutely true and fair, but we gotta stop saying that, right? We gotta stop making excuses to put that off till later, when things are less busy, when we have more time and space. All right, so bringing it all back together. Number one, first of the 5 steps. Anybody remember?
Existence of God.
The God question. You gotta answer that God question for yourself. Step number 2,
Holy.
believe, right? Manage the mindset. Specific belief that holiness is possible. Number 3,
Create space.
create space. Manage that whirlwind, right? Manage the whirlwind. It's not going away, but you gotta learn to manage it. Number 4, yes, clarify your core values, right? What do you really believe or value, and are your behaviors consistent with that? And then number 5, invest in mentoring, coaching, spiritual advisory, right? Our priests are not getting enough work from a spiritual advisory perspective. I know that for sure, right? Every priest in the diocese wants to be spending time working with men and women like you on creating healthier, holier lives, because the truth of the matter is, going back to influencing, to bring this all together, nothing, let me tell one last story. Father, Jesuit priest, who wrote, forgive me, The Jesuit's Guide to Almost Everything. Father Martin. Great book, by the way. Jesuit's Guide to Almost Everything. Just one of the best. He's giving a talk. I happen to be at this talk, and he's telling the story. As a young priest, he goes up to a bishop and goes, Bishop, what are we going to do about vocations? We're not attracting priests to the diocese. We need a plan. And the bishop looked at him, right, smiled, and said, Father Jim, the number one thing we can do, you can do, to increase vocations to the priesthood is to live your vocation joyfully. Live your vocation joyfully. Holiness begets holiness. People want holiness. Not because they think of holiness as the thing. What they want is joy. And that's the secret. I always joke, Catholic Church stinks at marketing. We're selling joy. We're selling peace. Not selling, but that's what we're offering, right? And everybody looks at us and says, rules, haters, bigots, whatever. No. We're selling the kind of peace, the kind of joy that you want for yourselves, that you want for your children. And the more we can embrace that and embody that, the more likely it is that we will influence the men and women around us, our kids, and ultimately allow them to create the healthy and holy life that we want. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Any questions before we wrap up? I did want to make like if anybody's interested in that core value, the concept of core values, I'm going to set something up for you before you leave.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, my
Thanks,
pleasure.
everybody. Good to see everybody.
Any questions? All right, let me just show you this real quick. Let me see if I can get this to work. If you go to personalcorevalues.com, sorry, I don't know why that's not going to share. That's not sharing. Let's see if I can get this to work. Well, personalcorevalues.com, and I think I could do this. I've created this assessment to make the whole core value discovery